Hello people, how's it going? Scotty. So here we have a communist, or shall I say a socialist, on pricing. Now to rip apart his argument.
I'm no communist, I'll tell you that right now. I believe a man should own his own house and car and cow. I like this private ownership, I want to be left alone. Let the government run its business and let me run my own.
A common question asked is, how does socialism make things cheaper?
How is this a common question? A common question asked, how does socialism make things cheaper? The simple answer is, it doesn't. With a basic understanding of supply and demand, and of course prices in the market, we can understand the reason why socialism doesn't make things cheaper. In fact, it has the opposite effect. One only needs to look at Chile in the early 1970s, of course with its price and wage controls that caused hyperinflation by 1973, thanks to Allende.
In 1970, with the support of Cuba's Fidel Castro, Chile elects the first communist president in the Western world. Salvador Allende immediately nationalizes basic industries and controls prices and wages. The Chicago boys remain quietly in the background. One of them is Rolf Luders, who earned his PhD with Milton.
Under Allende, the rate of increase in prices annualized of the month of September 73 was 1,000%, 1,000%.
And of course, not to forget Venezuela.
Just imagine, the country with the largest oil reserves in the world has no toilet paper.
And the shortages don't stop there. Other staples missing from supermarkets include soap, toothpaste, and rice. The lack is a direct result of the ongoing political crisis in Venezuela, a conflict between the regime of Nicolás Maduro and the opposition.
Venezuela, with all its price controls, as I explained in a video previously, you can see that Venezuela, thanks to a price ceiling, had caused food shortages. You can't just expect to artificially lower the costs of goods and services below market value, which destroys the incentive of businesses to produce more, simply because businesses are not going to produce at a loss. The problem with his entire argument is that theoretically his communism, as he's argued in the past, is supposed to be, stateless or moneyless, and of course the other part of the problem is the very fact that even if he did argue for a moneyless type economy, without prices you have no information for profits and losses. In other words, you wouldn't have the information as to how you're going to allocate scarce resources efficiently. So let's continue on with what he says.
Well, upon the obvious that the boss is not out for maximum profit.
In the real world, a company has to be able to provide for their consumers. In other words, when it comes down to it, I could, set the price of a product that I make for whatever price I want, but when it comes down to it, when economic reality sets in, it's what the consumer values that product for. The reason for this is because at the end of the day, if you were to produce products for your business and you set the price of the products, that doesn't mean to say that consumers are going to buy it. So we'll cut straight to the point of where he says how socialism makes things cheaper.
Here, from a retail point of view, exactly how socialism makes things cheaper. I'm going to give you the Cuban model as an example because it's the best example.
And don't forget people, this was of course Cuba, who had food shortages.
You have a store. It's got its operational costs, the same thing as any capitalist-owned store and whatnot. This is how much profit, say, the store has to make in order to equal its operational costs and whatnot. You've got, say, soap, toilet paper, towels, toothpaste, toothbrushes, all the things you actually really need. And they will generate this much profit. We'll call it essentials. And you got luxury items, televisions, MP3 players, computers, stuff that you really don't need to survive, but are there as luxuries. They constitute this much the income.
So There's two. There's two problems with his argument, right? The first problem, he's admitted that socialism is involving prices, right? Is basically involving a store that has to run a profit, okay? He's admitting this, right? After all, this is what this is about. This is how to make, you know, prices cheaper. The other part of the problem is this. So as he says that this is how much our essentials are going to make, right? He's basically telling you how much they're going to make in a profit in terms of essentials. How can you tell that? You don't know. You know something? That's a bit like me saying, running a company, I know how much I'm going to sell next month, or I know how much I'm going to sell in 2 months' time, or maybe half a year from now, or maybe a year's time. I know how much my profit margin is going to be. I don't. I simply do not. You can't determine how much you're going to sell of your essentials. You've no way of knowing that. You can't tell that for definite. It's all well setting a cost of your produce, etc. It's all well setting the costs, but it's down to the consumer of what they value, what they want. His essentials and luxuries, it's all well meeting the costs of the operational costs of his business, but at the end of the day, if you're just meeting the operational costs of your store and you're not making profit above that, how are you supposed to expand the size of your business? But get this, laugh people.
Now, this is where a socialist economy changes things, where a socialist store changes things. Let's say we want to make things better for people. What's one thing that would help you? Make the essentials cheaper. Okay, we'll make cheaper. We'll cut essentials, the price of essentials, in half. So people will be able to get them at a better price. Now, obviously the same amount of money still has to be made. So here's the difference. They raise the price of the luxuries to lower the prices on the essentials. That is how socialism makes things cheaper.
So since he's going to cut the price of essentials in half, what he's basically going to do is set a price ceiling of what I explained before. And when you set a price ceiling, you're basically going to destroy the incentive in order to produce more. In a free market, we can drive down the costs of both the essentials and, of course, the luxuries simply by producing more and giving consumers the free choice. So anyway, people, this was just a brief on how silly his argument on prices are. And the reality is, he would end up causing shortages, and due to the shortages, the costs of those essentials would go through the roof. So this is an indication that people like him have no understanding of supply and demand, and of course prices. Thank you for watching my video. I shall talk to you later. So people, feel free to like the video below, subscribe, share, favourite, and of course you can also check out my Patreon account, which I've also got there, and of course the video you can also check out on the price ceiling, which I described about the food shortages. That can also be informational for yourself. And of course I do have my vlogging channel, so you can go and check that out as well, and I will keep updating that. So anyway, thank you for watching the video, and of course you can also check out my Facebook and Twitter, and I shall talk to you later. Thank you for watching. Cheers.